Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, the 14th of July, 8 a.m. here in Melbourne. I'm delighted to be joined on Conversations with Thought Leaders by Bretz this morning. We're going to be talking all things business and endurance events as we discuss leading through our ultra marathon challenge. The pandemic certainly proving to be a marathon, that's for sure. Kai, good morning. How are you today?
Morning, David. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. So for those that don't know, my name's David Webley. I'm the host of Conversations with Thought Leaders. This is a platform we've created in the last 18 months to connect our community with inspirational leaders and people from across the world. I'm also the managing director of Granite Consulting. We're talent experts. It's a really interesting world for job seekers and businesses hiring talent at the moment. Feel free to reach out if you want a discussion around what's going on out there. So before we get into it, for those that don't know Kai, so Kai is a facilitator of transformation, change leader and executive coach. He's passionate about helping organizations drive cultural shifts and leaders build the high performance culture. He's worked across a dozen countries with McKinsey's, dual Australian, German citizen, and in Australia, he spent time in a senior leadership role with a leading retailer. So he's certainly done the hard yards in the corporate life. And outside of that, he's a keen runner who's happened to move into ultra running at an elite level, representing Australia in the 24th World Championship in 2019. And I believe he finished 11th, Kai, just under 260 kilometers in 24 hours. Pretty good going. Kai's also the publisher of a new book called Turning Right. We've got 20 copies of that to give away today. Pete's just going to share a quick screenshot of that. So there's an opportunity for comments. All comments will get a copy of that book. So please feel free to get involved in the chat and the Q&A function. So as a coach, facilitator, and now published author, Kai combines breadth of disciplines from corporate life, extensive education to doctorate level, elite level insights about our inner game through sports, and it's all really around inspiring the magic that humans are capable of. So we'll get into it. Good morning, Kai. Thanks again. Tell us about your backstory, please.
Well, you already said I'm German. That's always very important to get out of the way because people tend to struggle saying, oh, is he South African? Where is he from? Just my accent is quite weird to me. So, yeah, and the other one is looking at me. No, I'm not in my 20s. It's I'm actually well into my 40s now, and probably in summary, I'm just an adventurer. So that's where things like Antarctica just really fascinate me and excite me, just reading that. And so, yes, born, raised in Germany, went to school in Scotland for a year, which I absolutely loved. Got some of the bug of being international. So then during university, I went to Spain, stayed there for almost 3 years. So I did masters and then also a big chunk of my PhD or the doctorate, did that over there. And then the kind of international career I find very exciting. So as you see from that story, it's all about somehow pushing boundaries. And then when you keep climbing mountains, as probably many on this call will acknowledge, at some point there's nowhere really to go. And somehow I started leveling off and thought, well, so what's next? And some of that kind of no achievement is big enough, and it gets a bit draining even. And that's where somehow I found my love for ultra running. And for me, it was a journey, not where you say, yeah, it's another achievement. Well, you could look at it that way. For me, it was really personal growth in there, and that's what excites me. And that's what I'm doing nowadays, is really saying, how do I bring together my love for running and the kind of unlocking new challenges together with helping others to do something they thought could not be done. Yeah. And that is really fulfilling.
Yeah, fantastic. Were you always a keen runner as a student and growing up, or was it something you sort of moved into?
Yeah, so I did my first long distance run in first class in school. It was a 1 kilometer run.
Yeah.
And I was very true to my German heritage. So I was very measured. And so I wasn't overpacing. So think about a kid at 6, 7 years old. Everybody overpaces. Kai didn't overpace. And then 600 meters in, everybody had overtaken me. And I was still somehow very measured and notice, okay, now it's time to sprint because it's only a 1 kilometer run.
Yeah.
So yes.
Fair enough. And I'm interested to know a bit around the mental versus physical. And I guess taking that into the business world, your views around being physically fit for work and the mental challenges. And before I ask you to speak around that, I'm just going to mention again that we're going to leave the questions open as we go through. No such thing as a bad question. Just stick the questions. If there's anything you want clarification around, anything you think of, no need to wait till the end. We'll be taking them as we come through. So Kai, can we talk a bit around the mental and the physical piece?
Absolutely. So I guess it's obvious to everyone here that running for hundreds of kilometers would stretch any individual. So I've raced almost 260 kilometers within 24 hours at the World Champs. And another big race was I was out there for almost 69 hours, pretty much non-stop. So I ran 350 kilometers in Western Australia. And obviously one has to be physically fit. There's no question about it. But the physical fitness really gives you just the right to play. It gets you to the start line in a way. And latest after 6 to 12 hours of running, you would stop if you didn't have the mental strength. So I think really the core of the question you're just asking is really from a perspective of a non-runner. We are all facing big challenges, and regardless of what that big challenge is, it actually starts with mental strength, I think. So we have to have some skills how to deal with them. In running, it's physical fitness. Elsewhere, it's some technical skills. But really mentally, first you have to commit to the challenge and say, well, that takes courage, takes a leap of faith. And it's that faith of saying, somewhere throughout the challenge, we will find something within us that will bridge this gap of something the gap which the intellect it just can't bridge. And that's where it gets exciting and where the mental strength probably comes in most.
How important do you think structures around this? Because it strikes me in the last 18 months, and I sort of refer to it a bit as the elephant in the room right now, is are we working in the office remotely, working from anywhere? And I know some companies have been working from anywhere, people have been traveling, but there's a definite lot of conversations, when people are looking for employment, businesses are rebuilding, where will I be based? That's definitely happening a lot at the moment. And if you are not in an office all the time, then you do lose a bit of, should we call it old-fashioned structure? Clock in, clock out. Obviously outdated anyway, you could argue. But how important do you find structure is when you start to talk about mental versus physical? I, for one, have found working remotely, one of the things that was critical for me last year was to have my daily structures that I've always had. Otherwise, it's a bit like Groundhog Day.
Absolutely. I've learned over time that it's probably really about a balance. There's not enough structure, and probably many of us can relate to it, if not everybody, saying, well, if there's no structure, then we're just floating along and nothing really happens, which might be okay for a few days, but then it becomes draining in itself. And then there's the other extreme of there's too much structure. I mean, I'm listening to conversations where companies really force people to come back in the office, and I think rightly so. Some employees ask, well, it has been working, so what is the rationale for this? Yeah. And some people are actually more creative, and some are getting more done, not always being in the office. So there is an element of what's the right balance of having some structure, but not being over-structured. So to really get some discipline in, but not to be overly controlled and micromanaged. And that is hard to walk that path.
Yeah, and I think it also, I guess, ultra running, if you're part of a team for Australia, but you're still out there on your own, aren't you? Whereas you could argue that, and I shared something on LinkedIn last week, that it's for some people, if other people are relying on you, working from home all the time, quite a selfish thing to do. Because other people need your collaboration and some human to human contact, I think it's going to be a discussion that's with us for quite some time, for sure. Mindset. So how do you approach your mindset leading up to a race, and what have you learned from your corporate career that you took into that, and perhaps vice versa?
So I think that the most important finding I somehow had was sometimes I'm motivated not to fail, and other times I'm motivated to succeed. And in the past, it just happened, and I thought, well, this was a bad race or this was a bad meeting. But if we then track it down to where was my mind at, so what was my mindset? It very often was in order to not fail. So I was really driven by fears, and somehow that kind of almost scarcity of saying, oh, there is not enough, and things will just not work out well. Yeah. And a great example was a race I had in 2016 in Christchurch. It was a 100-kilometer race. I wanted to qualify for the Australian team for 100 kilometers, and I failed miserably, absolutely miserably. Physically, I was there, and mentally, I probably ran an hour slower than I could have done physically. It was just, the mindset wasn't there. Yeah. And then there are the other races where I just bring the right mindset to it. And it's just the kind of, it's focusing on the process. It's more being in flow, trusting that things will go all right, and being okay with even the idea that things might not go all right. It's really that kind of, I'm here to succeed, and let's see what happens. And that is that's where it gets exciting in the business world, I think, because the real great outcomes as an individual, as a leader, but also leading teams and leading organizations, is when we collectively are motivated to succeed. And there's huge potential of just upside potential, as I've seen in the last few years. Maybe I can just share a stat which I find pretty impressive. So after almost 2 decades of after 2 decades of long distance running, I improved my performance in a 24-hour race by 22% within 18 months. So wow. I've been running for almost 2 decades, where you say, yeah, you're pretty much maxed out. There's tinkering along the edges. Yeah. And then running for 24 hours, where you just see how far do you get in 24 hours. I ran 212 kilometers in 2018. And I ran close to 260 the year after. And you say that clearly, I mean, everybody will understand, there is something which is beyond the physical. We all have mental reserves, and how do we tap into them and get them out of us? So the question I have for everybody on this webinar is, what is your version of the 22% in your world? And it doesn't have to be running. And how do you get that?